Good morning and happy 8th day of Hanukkah. I'd like to share with you a story that I discovered when the first year I worked at Harlock Library during the holiday season. I was shelving, putting books away, and found this wonderful book called One Candle. It's by a very famous and beloved children's author named Eve Bunting. The beautiful sepia-toned illustrations are by K. Wendy Pop. The book has become a holiday tradition for me. I must pick it up and read it every year, and it impacts me every year with its beauty. And I'd like to share it with you. One Candle. This Hanukkah is like every other one. Our house is filled with food and family and delicious cooking smells. Our great Aunt Rose is here. She's Grandma's sister. There's Mom and Dad, we 3 kids, and my uncle and his family. When Grandma and Grandpa arrive at our house, Dad gets to hug them first. Grandma brings her potato. When I was little, I thought naturally it was to eat or to grate for the latkes that Mom makes, but I learned it is not. Grandma puts the big brown potato on the plate in the middle of the table, and Great Aunt Rose leans across to touch it with trembling fingers. Her glasses are misted over. Poor Great Aunt Rose, my cousin Nancy whispers. She's crying again this year. You'd cry too if you were her, my big sister Ruth says. After sunset, we light one candle in the menorah with the shamash for the first night of Hanukkah. We say special prayers and take our places at the table. Dad piles our plates with sliced brisket and gravy. Mom passes the latkes and the sour cream and the dishes mounted high with applesauce. The candles in the menorah burn low, and the shadows tremble on the ceiling. The table buzzes with conversation. And I love all our holidays when we're together like this, but maybe I love Hanukkah most of all. Here's a picture of the Hanukkah table. Try to pan it for you. There we go. After we've eaten, Mom looks over at Grandma. I think it's time, Mama. And Grandma nods. Then Dad goes into the kitchen and brings back the things Grandma will need. Grandma takes a small knife and begins to hollow the potato. And if I were reading this for story time, I would begin to ask the children, what do you think Grandma's going to do with that potato? So I'll ask you the same thing. What in the world is Grandma going to do with this potato? We were all very quiet, even my cousin baby Sam, who has been fussing all through dinner, trying to pull off his bib. We watch as Grandma piles the small pieces of scooped out potato onto her plate. Tell us now about the bedtime, Mama, Mom says. Her voice is soft and loving. We lean forward. We know this story by heart, but we want to hear it again. To us, this story has become Hanukkah. Grandma takes Great Aunt Rose's hand. Well, it happened when we were very young. We were separated from our families and put into a camp. And I would tell the children, this is not like a camp that you think of here in America. It was a terrible place called Buchenwald. That was in Germany. There was a war on at the time, and the Nazis, the Germans who were in charge, didn't like the Jews. Why? My little sister Bitsy asks, and I remember how, one by one, we'd all ask that question. Baby Sam will probably ask it next. Grandma shrugs, and Grandpa says, the Nazis didn't like a lot of people. It wasn't only the Jews. Grandpa wasn't in a camp. He met Grandma afterward when she came to America. The camp was like the worst prison you could imagine, Grandma says. We were always hungry, always cold. There were 7 women in our barracks, but at least Rose and I were together. And then Suddenly, Great Aunt Rose begins to whisper the names of the other women, the way you'd say in a prayer. And here are pictures of the other women as Aunt Rose reads their names. Rose was 13 and I was 12, Grandma remembers. Uncle Leon shivers at the thought. Just Ruth's age. We look at my sister Ruth and then at Grandma, trying to imagine. The older women worked in the fields, Grandma continues, remembering. Rose and I worked in the kitchens. We were so small and so thin. It's a marvel they even kept us. We helped cook for the officers. Grandma leans back in her chair and closes her eyes. Her chin quivers. All that wonderful food. None of it for us. I look around the table. I'm so full from Mom's delicious cooking, and there are still leftovers. I can't even imagine going hungry. Hanukkah was coming, Grandma says. We knew because we kept the dates hidden on a piece of paper. Working there in the kitchen, I got an idea. Little by little, I smuggled things out. A blob of margarine in a scrap of paper, small enough to hide in my hand. 2 matches, and on the day before Hanukkah, a potato, not as big as this one. I brought it out under my skirt. Grandma puts her hand over her heart. I was so frightened. I thought my chest would burst with fear. The guard at the door looked at me suspiciously. Aunt Rose walked beside me. She gave me courage. Here are Grandma and Aunt Rose getting ready to walk past the guard and the dog. Great Aunt Rose shakes her head. No, I had no courage to give you, Lily. You held me up, Grandma says. What would they have done if they'd caught you, Ruth asks. The Great Aunt Rose doesn't answer. But gives a little moan, thinking about it. There. We were all right, Grandma says. She squeezes her sister's hand. When we got back to the barracks, the other women couldn't believe what I'd done. A potato. Heaven. Were we going to eat it right away? Remember, they were very, very hungry. No, that wasn't why I took the risk. Grandma looks around the table at each of us. We know why she took the risk. And here are the women huddled around looking at the potato. And here's Grandma with the potato, back in those days with her yellow star that says Jude, that everyone had to wear in the camp. I hollowed out part of that potato the way I did with this one. Grandma touches the potato and stares down at it. We ate the pieces I'd saved. Nancy interrupts. Raw? Raw potato? Yuck. Grandma smiles and nods her head. Delicious. Better than any candy. Then we put the margarine I'd stolen inside the potato, the little hollowed out part. Pulled a thread from Rose's skirt to make a wick and lit the flame. She pauses. We had a candle for Hanukkah. Then that Hanukkah candle lifted us, Grandma says, and there are tears in her eyes. It lifted us to the stars. Betsy screws up her face. How could it lift you, Grandma? In our minds, sweetheart, in our hearts. There is Grandma with the candle, back in the camp remembering. Now we watch as Grandma pours oil into the potato and lights the wick I've made from twisted threads. We have a flame. We have a candle. And here's Grandma and the children with their very special candle. Grandma wipes away her tears, and we all stand up. May I take it, I ask? Yes, Grandma says. I set the candle on the windowsill, and it glows back on itself in the dark glass. And there is the potato candle and the other candles. And in Jewish tradition, it's very important to put the Hanukkah candle in the window. We go outside. Dad has switched off all the house lights, and the Hanukkah candle has burned itself away. But on the windowsill, there's still visible this one steady flame from the potato. My sister Ruth whispers close to my ear, "Why do you think Grandma wants to do this every year?" I shrug my shoulders because I don't really know for sure, but I think it has to do with being strong in the bad time and remembering it in the good time. And, most of all, for the women in Grandma's barracks and the others who didn't live to come out and be here today. Grandma passes the little glasses of sweet wine to the grown-ups and the grape juice to us. We raise the glasses toward the flame. L'chaim, Grandma says, to life. To life, we chant. And there they are, outside, chanting to life. And there is a beautiful, and in that moment, in that very moment, we are all lifted up to the stars. And in Jewish tradition, on the first night of Hanukkah, we say a special blessing, thanking God for enabling us to reach this season. And I am so grateful to the author and the illustrator for sharing this very beautiful and powerful Hanukkah story. And I hope you'll discover it for yourself and share it with your family. Happy Hanukkah.